When I finally bought my dream lake cabin, I expected peace and quiet, not drama. But on move-in day, the local HOA president, Karen, stormed over claiming I was violating community rules just for unloading my U-Haul. Things escalated when she called the cops, insisting I was trespassing on my own property. The officers quickly realized I was the rightful owner, but that moment sparked my deep dive into the property records. To my surprise, I discovered something Karen had overlooked for years. The HOA didn't actually own the private access road to her house. I did. A quirk in the property deeds had left the road as part of my land parcel. So while she tried to make my life difficult, she was unknowingly dependent on me for every trip home. I didn't seek revenge. I sought boundaries. I set fair terms for road maintenance, ensured safe passage, and reminded her that respect works both ways. It was the ultimate twist of poetic justice. The very person who tried to kick me out had to drive on a road with my name on it.
When I first set out to move into my lake cabin, I imagined the day would be filled with a sense of excitement, fresh air, and the satisfaction of beginning a new chapter in a peaceful setting. What I did not anticipate was a conflict that would turn into both an inconvenience and, surprisingly, a valuable life lesson. As the moving truck pulled up and I began unloading boxes, I was approached by the head of the local homeowners association, a woman who seemed to carry herself with an air of authority that went beyond what was written in any bylaw. She marched toward me with folded arms, immediately demanding to know what I thought I was doing. Her tone carried the implication that I was in violation of some unwritten rule. Before I could even explain that I had just closed on the property and was moving in, she was already criticizing the way the truck was parked, the noise of unloading, and even the fact that I had not yet displayed the required HOA parking sticker, something I had not even been given yet. Within minutes, the situation escalated. Instead of engaging in a reasonable conversation or offering to clarify the community's guidelines, she announced she was calling the police. To my surprise, she followed through. Standing on my own driveway, I found myself the subject of a police call, not because of anything unlawful, but because of one neighbor's misplaced sense of power. When the officers arrived, they were polite and professional, quickly checking my identification and verifying ownership documents. It became clear within minutes that I was the rightful property owner and that the accusations had no substance. The police left with a shake of the head, leaving me with both relief and disbelief that my first interaction in this new community had taken such a turn. While at first the experience was frustrating, I later came to see it as educational. It was a vivid reminder of how entitlement can distort someone's perception of authority. Homeowners associations are meant to serve the shared interests of residents, ensuring property values remain stable and that neighborhoods stay well maintained. But when individuals assume that their role gives them unchecked power, conflicts arise. In this case, the HOA president believed she could dictate who belonged, when, and under what circumstances, even if it meant disregarding property rights. This highlighted an important principle. Authority should always be grounded in fairness, transparency, and respect for individual rights. The incident also shed light on the importance of preparation and documentation. Owning property is not just about enjoying the land or the home, it is also about understanding the legal foundation that secures those rights. When Karen called the police, the only thing that truly mattered was proof of ownership. My deed and identification were enough to resolve the matter. Without them, her accusations might have created unnecessary complications. This experience reinforced for me that every homeowner should be aware of what documents are essential and should keep them readily accessible, especially during transitions like moving in. Most importantly, that day served as a lesson in self-control. It would have been easy to match hostility with hostility, to argue back with sharp words or escalate the confrontation further. But choosing to remain calm not only kept the situation from worsening, but also demonstrated to the officers and to myself that composure carries more weight than shouting matches. In educational terms, this is a critical takeaway. When faced with conflict, especially one rooted in someone else's entitlement, the most effective response is to remain grounded. Emotional reactions can cloud judgment, while calmness often allows the truth to reveal itself more clearly. What began as an unpleasant encounter ultimately taught me several things. Entitlement often leads to overreach, documentation is a homeowner's strongest shield, and self-control is the best defense against unjustified aggression. That move-in day did not go as planned, but the lessons I walked away with became the foundation for how I would approach every future interaction in that community. Instead of viewing it purely as an attack, I came to see it as an education in property rights, personal boundaries, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing and standing by the truth.
After the chaos of the move-in incident, I found myself curious about the details of my property. The situation with the Homeowners Association president had opened my eyes to how quickly misunderstandings or deliberate overreach could become legal or personal headaches. I decided that the best way to prevent such situations in the future was to take a closer look at what I actually owned, beyond just the cabin itself. Most people assume that when they buy property, the only thing that matters is the house, the land it sits on, and maybe the yard around it. But in reality, property ownership often extends to easements, access roads, utility rights, and other elements that are not immediately obvious. To get clarity, I pulled out my deed, property survey, and all the associated paperwork that came with closing. As I went through the documents, I noticed something curious. The road leading to my cabin, and more importantly, the road that also provided the only access to my neighbor's home, was clearly marked within the boundaries of my parcel. At first, I thought it was just an error on the map. It seemed unlikely that such an important strip of land was technically included in my property. But after cross-referencing the county's online property records and consulting the surveyor's notes, I realized that the road had always been part of this parcel. Somewhere along the way, the assumption had been made that the Homeowners Association controlled it, but no one had ever updated the records to reflect such a transfer. The discovery was both surprising and enlightening. From a purely practical standpoint, it meant that every car traveling to my neighbor's home, including the HOA president's, was driving across land that I legally owned. This was not something I had gone looking for. It was simply an overlooked fact buried in the documentation. From an educational perspective, though, it highlighted an essential truth. Ownership is defined not by assumptions, not by who speaks the loudest, but by what the records actually say. Many disputes between neighbors or communities and property owners arise because of misunderstandings or a lack of awareness about boundaries. The only way to truly resolve these questions is to look at the legal documents, which are the ultimate authority. What I learned through this process is the importance of due diligence. Most homeowners stop their inquiry after signing the papers at closing. They trust that the realtor, the title company, and the county have handled everything correctly. While this is usually true, there can be hidden details that only become relevant in times of conflict. By taking the time to review my records carefully, I not only gained peace of mind, but also put myself in a position of strength. If another dispute arose, I would not have to rely on vague assumptions or neighborhood gossip. I had the documents to back me up. This discovery also underscored a broader educational point about the role of property rights in community living. Shared spaces, access roads, and easements are often taken for granted, but they are critical to how neighborhoods function. When ownership is not clear, it creates an environment where conflicts are more likely to arise because people assume they have authority that they might not actually possess. In my case, the HOA president assumed the association controlled the road. The reality was far different, and that reality had legal consequences. What was most valuable about this experience was not the sense of leverage it gave me over someone who had tried to make my life difficult, but the understanding that knowledge itself is power. In disputes, facts always carry more weight than emotions. Having the right documentation on hand does not just give you the ability to stand your ground, but it also gives you confidence, because you know that your position is not based on opinion, but on verifiable records. This is a lesson that applies beyond property ownership. In any situation where authority and responsibility are in question, the person who has taken the time to gather and understand the facts will always be better prepared. In the end, what I discovered by examining those documents was more than just a quirk of property lines. It was a reminder that ownership extends far beyond the walls of a house, and that a smart homeowner treats their deed as more than just a piece of paper. It is the key to understanding one's rights, responsibilities, and boundaries. That realization transformed the way I looked at my property and ensured that if conflicts ever arose again, I would be prepared not with anger or assumptions, but with knowledge and evidence. Once I realized that the road in question legally belonged to me, I faced a choice. It would have been easy to let anger guide my next steps, especially after being treated with hostility and disrespect on the very first day I moved in. The thought of using my newfound authority as a way to teach a lesson was tempting. After all, the HOA president had gone out of her way to make me feel unwelcome, even going so far as to involve the police. Now the tables had turned, and I held the upper hand. But as I reflected on the situation, I recognized that the real test of character was not in discovering this power, but in deciding how to use it. That became the starting point of an important lesson. Responsibility is always more valuable than retaliation. Owning the road gave me legal control over who could use it and under what conditions. In theory, I could have blocked access, charged fees, or made life very difficult for those who relied on it, particularly the very neighbor who had tried to force me out before I had even unpacked. But while that might have offered short-term satisfaction, it would not have served me well in the long run. Communities thrive not when people wield authority as a weapon, but when they create fair and workable systems that ensure mutual respect. I realized that the best way forward was not to mirror the hostility I had been shown, but to establish a framework of fairness that left no room for ambiguity. The first step was to outline reasonable terms for the road's use. Since I was responsible for maintaining it, I decided to implement a simple agreement. Anyone using the road would need to contribute fairly to its upkeep. This was not about punishment, it was about practicality. Roads wear down over time, especially in areas with harsh weather, and maintenance is costly. By requiring contributions, I wasn't seeking to profit. I was ensuring that the road remained safe and accessible for everyone, myself included. This approach turned what could have been a source of conflict into a matter of shared responsibility. The educational takeaway here is that power without responsibility leads to chaos, but power combined with fairness builds respect. By framing the situation around maintenance and safety rather than control, I shifted the narrative from "I own the road so I decide" to "we all use the road so we all contribute." Even those who may not have been pleased with the arrangement could see its logic. It was a reminder that leadership often means doing what is best for the group, even when personal feelings might tempt you otherwise. Another lesson I learned was about communication. After drafting the agreement, I approached the neighbors, including the HOA president, with calm explanations rather than confrontational ultimatums. I explained what I had discovered in the property records, clarified my legal ownership, and outlined the maintenance plan. By being transparent and straightforward, I eliminated room for rumors or misunderstandings. Even though not everyone was thrilled about the change, no one could deny that I had handled it openly and with integrity. In situations where power dynamics shift, transparency is often the difference between lasting resentment and reluctant respect. The HOA president, who once believed she had unchecked control, now had to acknowledge my role in the community. But instead of becoming adversaries locked in constant battles, I set the tone for a relationship where respect and fairness could gradually replace hostility. What I walked away from this chapter of the story was not just a stronger position in the community, but also a deeper understanding of what it means to lead by example. Power is a test, and how we respond to it defines the kind of environment we create for ourselves and those around us.
In choosing responsibility over retaliation, I not only secured peace for myself, but also laid the foundation for healthier community interactions. This was the real victory. Not owning the road, but owning the choice to use it with integrity.
When the dust settled and I had put the agreements in place for the road, I found myself reflecting on the larger meaning of everything that had happened. What began as a frustrating encounter with an overzealous HOA president had turned into a journey of discovery, responsibility, and growth. The final, and perhaps most important lesson, was about the value of boundaries and respect, not just in property disputes, but in life as a whole. Too often, conflicts between neighbors, coworkers, or even family members arise because one person fails to recognize or honor the boundaries of another. Respect for those boundaries, whether physical, legal, or personal, is the foundation on which all healthy communities are built. In this situation, the road was more than just a strip of gravel leading to a few houses. It symbolized the boundary between authority that is legitimate and authority that is assumed. The HOA president believed that her position gave her the right to dictate who belonged and who did not, even when the facts said otherwise. Her decision to call the police was not just about a moving truck. It was an attempt to assert control over something that was never hers to control. This highlighted an educational truth. Respect cannot be demanded through intimidation. It must be earned through fairness and understanding. If she had approached me as a neighbor rather than an enforcer, the entire situation could have been avoided. At the same time, my discovery of owning the road presented me with my own boundary test. Just because I had the legal right to restrict access did not mean it was the right thing to do. Respect is a two-way street, and I could not reasonably expect others to respect me if I was unwilling to extend the same courtesy to them. By creating a fair maintenance plan and ensuring everyone had access, I was respecting both their needs and my own. This balance of rights and responsibilities is what allows communities to thrive rather than fall apart. In many ways, the situation forced me to embody the very principles I wished my neighbor had shown me from the beginning: restraint, fairness, and a willingness to listen. There is also a broader lesson here about property rights and personal agency. Too often people allow themselves to be bullied or intimidated because they are unaware of their own rights. This is not limited to property disputes. It applies to workplaces, relationships, and other areas of life as well. When you know your rights and boundaries, you are far less likely to be manipulated or controlled by someone else's assumptions of power. Knowledge equips you to stand your ground calmly, rather than reacting emotionally or defensively. The situation with the road was a clear demonstration of this principle. Had I not researched the records and understood the facts, I might have continued to believe the HOA president's version of events. Instead, I could approach the matter from a position of confidence, grounded in verifiable truth. Respect also extends to the idea of community itself. Living in close proximity to others requires cooperation and compromise. No one can thrive in isolation, and shared spaces, whether roads, lakes, or parks, require collective responsibility. By handling the road situation fairly, I set an example of how respect for one's own rights can coexist with respect for others. This dual respect fosters a healthier community environment where neighbors are less likely to see each other as adversaries and more likely to see themselves as partners in maintaining a shared quality of life. In the end, the real victory was not in proving the HOA president wrong or in owning the road. The victory was in learning how to transform a potential source of bitterness into a platform for fairness and dignity. Boundaries protect us, but respect connects us. Both are essential if we are to live harmoniously with others. This story became less about conflict and more about the reminder that respect, once established, can change the tone of an entire community. It is not always easy to respond to hostility with fairness, but doing so ensures that the environment we create around us reflects the values we hold within us. That, ultimately, is the lesson I carried forward. Stand firm in your boundaries, but always extend respect to others, because that combination is what truly builds lasting peace.